Have you ever used a nasal spray to deal with a cold? Imagine using one so much you end up needing surgery. Well, that's exactly what happened to one woman who told us she had become addicted. Thousands more people have been opening up with similar stories. So how and why are they getting hooked? I'm Mary Nightingale, and this is what you need to know. Well, joining me are our reporter Sam Holder and producer Olivia Mustafa. Now, Sam, explain, these sprays are used for congestion, which seems pretty harmless. Why and how are people becoming dependent on them?
When I first started working on this story, which came as a result of Liv's original work onto this, my first thought was this seems quite bizarre and pretty niche. But actually, the more I started speaking to people about this, the more I realised how widespread the problem is. I mean, I went to the pub a few weeks ago to tell somebody I was working on a slightly unusual investigation, and then they turned to me and said, "Oh, you know what, I think I might be addicted." What we are talking about here are these kind of decongestant nasal sprays, and they contain something either called xylometazoline or oxymetazoline, and the biggest brands are Otravine and Sudafed. So these are decongestant sprays. The packaging clearly tells you not to use it for more than a week, but lots of people don't read the packaging properly. And if you do use it more than a week, you can end up with something called rebound congestion. So this is technically, it's a dependency rather than an addiction. And if you use the product for more than 7 days, you get inflammation in your nose. I'm not going to go too deeply into the science, but essentially it feels like you have a blocked nose, even if you no longer have a virus. And the only thing that really relieves it is using more of the spray. So you see people using these sprays every single day for years on end. So I went to Fleetwood to meet with Georgia after she told us that she had been dependent on nasal sprays for more than a decade. But then when I got to her house, I met her mum, Celia, and I asked her how long she'd been using them.
Probably about 20 years now.
Every single day?
Yeah, every single day I take it, yeah.
What is it like if you stop using the sprays?
Horrible. You just feel like you're suffocated. But I do wish I could not be dependent on it and live my life without it, but it's so hard to come off it.
Can't breathe, my mouth's dry, and eating is hard as well. If you're blocked up, you can't eat properly.
Well, Celia says she's been using it every day for decades. Did she think that was unusual, do you think?
Yes, and I think what is so interesting about this is both Celia and Georgia thought they were sort of alone in this. I mean, obviously it was happening to both of them, but they didn't realise that this was something that affected a lot of people, was really quite a common thing. So I was on TikTok one day and I came across a video of a creator, his name was Curtis, and he was sharing his and documenting his experience with the nasal spray, and his comments were flooded with people in the same boat. It's just like Sam was saying earlier, from being in the pub to talking to people at work. There are so many people who've ended up in this situation, and I think the reason why it's taken so many people by surprise seeing it spoken about on TikTok is a lot of people are quite embarrassed about it. It's not the nicest thing to admit to people that you have to use nasal spray 4 times a day to be able to breathe through your nose when you're kind of aware that this is something entirely preventable.
It's not just the dependency, though, is it? I mean, it can actually end up doing serious damage. Can you explain that?
Exactly. So we heard a bit from Celia there about sort of when she doesn't take the spray, it makes her mouth dry, it makes eating difficult. So it's not just that people have to use this to breathe through their nose. It affects people in a number of ways. The thing that I've heard from the dozens of people that I've spoken to is that the feeling you get when you need to take the spray is almost unbearable blocking up of your nose. People have reported headaches, nosebleeds as well, and the sort of sinus congestion that comes with it. But as well as these sort of physical side effects, it's also in some ways emotional. People are talking about feeling the panic and anxiety of, oh, I've got to go on holiday, I need to make sure I've got 5 in my suitcase just in case Greece doesn't have them. And people are sort of also struggling with sleeping because at night it's when the congestion worsens. And for some people, things get really bad and they feel that they just cannot cope without the spray. And that's where sometimes surgical intervention is needed to help people sort of break out of this cycle. And you're going to want to hear this. It's from Hannah, which is another woman we've spoken to who did have to have surgery to kind of, like I said, escape this cycle of depending on and overusing the spray.
It would feel so heavy within my face, not just my nose, but all underneath my eyes. My eyes would feel all puffed up. Literally, the only way how I could describe it is I either wanted to punch myself in the face or pull my nose off my face.
I mean, it's really graphic. It's appalling, is it? Do we know how many people are in this similar situation?
Well, this is part of the problem. We don't at all, because these products can be bought in supermarkets, in shops. You don't need a prescription. There's no real data as to how many people are buying them and how many people are misusing them. You know, if they were only sold in a pharmacy, for example, that kind of data would need to be recorded. There was a study in Norway that suggested that out of a population of 5 million people, potentially 700,000 people are addicted to nasal sprays. So a massive number of people in a relatively small country. We just don't have the data for that at the moment. And that is what some of the experts we've spoken to and some of the people we've spoken to who are addicted to the product would like to see.
Now, earlier on, when we started this chat, you said they're dependent, they're not addicted. But now you're saying they're addicted. What is the difference? I mean, if you can't give it up, you're addicted, aren't you?
Well, I think technically, it depends who you would speak to, but I think addiction perhaps has some sort of implication that people are getting high off these products or that there's a thrill to it, and there's psychological elements as well, which is up for debate here. But this more is a dependency in that if you stop using it, you have bad effects. You end up with symptoms that can only be relieved by it. So you're not getting a thrill out of using these products. It's just to enable you to continue breathing normally.
But nonetheless, you do seem to get withdrawal symptoms, which would chime with that. The companies that produce these sprays, what do they say?
Well, look, Mary, the companies, they have to include messages on the bottles, on the boxes, in the pamphlets, saying not to use them for more than 7 days.
So many people have said, we just didn't realise. We just didn't see when we started using it. We innocently began using it because we had a cold, and in the blink of an eye, we were kind of in this situation where we couldn't stop.
Is there any guidance for what people should or can do if they do think they've become dependent?
So obviously, the number one thing to do, if you're listening to this and you're in a situation where you're dependent on this to breathe through your nose, you've been maybe using it for a number of years, contact your GP. In terms of what people can do, some people have talked about going cold turkey, weaning themselves off gradually. It's worth noting as well that while we've mentioned that some people do need to have some kind of surgical intervention to help them break out of this, that's not the case for everyone. Some people will and can just go on using it without any sort of serious damage being done. But it is recommended that people do stop if they have been using it for more than 7 days.
And what about to stop yourself becoming dependent in the first place, Sam?
Well, that is an interesting question. What's really struck me about doing this story, and it's something that Liv mentioned before, is that a lot of the people coming forward were quite nervous about speaking because it is, as Liv said, it's a little bit embarrassing.
It's not very glamorous.
No, it's not. I mean, it's an addiction to something you stick up your nose, which is not the kind of thing people want to talk about. But actually, all the people we spoke to wanted to take part because they wanted to raise awareness. You know, some of them people have done videos on TikTok, but obviously this is a potentially different audience they can be reaching on a national news programme. That you do need to read the small print here, and that it can have a serious impact on your life if you use it for more than 7 days. What some of the people, in fact, what everybody we spoke to wanted to see was that these types of products, they'd like them to only be sold in pharmacies. Not prescription only, but just only available in pharmacies, so that when you buy them, the pharmacist can just tell you face to face, do not use this for more than 7 days, or this can happen. And perhaps they can keep an eye out if you keep coming in and buying, that they might notice that you've been using it for longer than that period and reiterate that advice. And that could hopefully save potentially thousands of people becoming dependent on these kinds of products.
Because not only can you get them in supermarkets and pharmacies, you can also order them online. Someone we spoke to had a repeat order from Amazon where it was coming in a package multiple times a month.
Can I just ask you, this may be a naive question, would you know if you are dependent? I mean, what tells you you're dependent?
Well, this is the funny thing, is that quite a few people I've spoken to that we've not necessarily interviewed, just speaking to them out and about at work, at the pub, didn't realise that they were dependent, and then suddenly thought, hold on, I've been using this product for 2 years now, every day or every couple of days, because I always feel like I've got a blocked nose. And then suddenly they realise, well, actually, there's no way I could have had a virus for that long, but people just keep using it because the symptoms are there, and they're not really thinking, it's a tiny little bottle and you can buy it anywhere. Why would you think that this would be
That it could be potentially harmful? So should anyone who uses this stuff regularly be looking at themselves and asking themselves this question?
I mean, you should not be using it for more than 7 days. That is very clear from the companies that make it. They say they help millions of people deal with short-term relief of these kind of viruses that block your nose, and these products are really helpful. And I mean, if you've used them, they are really helpful if you've got a blocked nose, but you should not use them for more than 7 days, even if your symptoms persist.
Okay, Sam and Olivia, so interesting. Thank you very much. That's all for this quick briefing. Remember, you can subscribe to What You Need to Know wherever you get your podcasts, so you never miss an episode. And you can watch full episodes on ITVX, YouTube and Spotify. Until next time, thanks for joining us.